So welcome back to another video. This time I'm going to talk to you about a dragonfly. So I just found a dragonfly sitting next to my car, and it got me thinking about how when I was younger and I grew up in the church, that I was taught that God was in control of everything, from the smallest of the creatures to the largest of the creatures. And anytime anything happened, God was in control of the weather, God was in control of your life, He was in control of the animals. And whenever things happened that we didn't understand, we couldn't provide any kind of, using rationalism, we couldn't find any kind of rational explanation for it. It was always the mysteries of God, mysteries of heaven was the way to sort of sidestep the fact that, we were coming up short in terms of being able to have any kind of viable explanation. So the dragonfly. So I got to thinking about the poor bastard. He's dead, and he's died, and one of the things that got me thinking about how God can interface with every single creature and that He controls. So does He cause every creature to die, and does He cause the energy and the life to vacate that insect whenever they die? Well, I would say probably not. Same thing with human beings. Does He have some kind of supernatural hand over every individual's life? And I don't know that He doesn't, but I don't know that He does. And that's, of course, what I was taught. That's what I was indoctrinated to believe. And I began to question that the older I got, and the more I thought about, just the existence of life and how God could sort of, how a divine being, a supernatural being could interact with the human world in terms of, what does He have? Is He like a wizard, and He has magical powers, and He could just, operate from heaven, down to earth? And it was just these kind of unanswered questions. They were just kind of rational deductions, things that you started making in your head, that the Bible, really isn't scientific. It doesn't really provide any kind of, if you read it, it seems void of any kind of scientific knowledge whatsoever. And so that was a big problem for me, because I recognized that science had its limitations, and and I took what the Bible said and I wanted to believe it, but I began to wonder, if they say that God's in control of everything, and He can do this and He can do that, then I began to wonder, how does He do those things? How can? And of course, the Bible doesn't really get into explaining those details. And then people would sidestep that issue by saying, well, if God wanted to know how He does it, He would have told us. Whatever. That's it's an answer. It's an argument to go back to that question. Yeah, if you want, but it's an assertion. But is it the truth? I don't know. Does anyone know that? And it seemed to me it was just sort of like, it's the mysteries of life kind of thing. It's like, okay, you acknowledge you don't have the answer, or we don't know all the answers, but someday, when we get to heaven, God will tell us all about it. It's like, you don't know that. That's because you're coming up short, and you don't have an answer to the question. So, yeah, I look at the dragonfly, and I see its lifeless, insect body there, and think to myself, now, it could have died for any number of natural reasons, not because of, a God was saying, well, his number's up, time to pull the plug on this one and suck the energy out of it and let him die. No, and I know it sounds very, very ridiculous what I'm proposing, what I'm saying, but that's my point. Is it was ridiculous to me when I began to really contemplate the idea of some deity, some supernatural being operating in some other realm, some other dimension, and how they would interface with the world. Like, oh, God makes the trees and the grass and the flowers grow. No, it does. Photosynthesis does. And we know that so it just seems like a very basic, elementary, unscientific explanation when you get it. The writers of the Bible, when they were trying to explain the world around them, they were void of today's modern medicine. They were void of understanding the things that today's modern scientists understand. Now, there's always been this sort of contention between the scientific community and Christianity. If you remember Galileo, he was ostracized and kicked out and excommunicated from the Catholic Church because the things that he put forth, which we know now today to be true, was heresy for them at that time. So I'm just saying, just because religion doesn't want to believe in science, or doesn't want to, sort of marry up their religion where it falls short with science, and let science be the explanation for things, because science is void of any kind of God doing everything, and it says that God's not the one doing it. It's not that it's man, but it's just life. It's living organisms. It's biology 101 stuff. It's not some kind of supernatural explanation. And there was something else I was going to say too in regards to creationism. They try to blend in finding creationism and that God, this is how God did it scientifically, or that obviously when we look at Charles Darwin and we look at some of the ways that his theory came short with theories of evolution, there was some missing links, there was some gaps in there. But does that mean that it's not mostly true? I don't know. It very well could be mostly true, but we're still kind of like, if we're still evolving, I'm just, then why have we not all evolved into whatever, why has there been no other evolution beyond the Homo sapiens as what we are? Oh, well, we used to be Neanderthals, or we used to be caveman, or we went through all these changes, and I didn't live back then, so I don't know. And they say, well, they found historical evidence, they found archaeological evidence. Okay, it's just, science and religion have always been at odds with one another. It's just, so when I look at things through those scientific lenses, life makes a lot more sense to me. When I try to look at it through the lens of Christianity, through religion, I end up coming up short. It ends up coming up short. It ends up creating more questions than it does provide answers. And so, that's my thing. And it's like, I know it probably sounds ridiculous, looking at a dead dragonfly or anything, any bird. It dies when it dies. I have a hard time getting behind that there's some divine creator, some being up in the sky that's kind of orchestrating all of this. Because if that's the case, if one breath you're going to say that there's a God and he's controlling everything, or there's angels watching out and all this stuff. I was just recently reading a story about the Malaysia Flight 370, I think it was, the one that went down in the Indian Ocean, and it was a couple years back, I think it was in 2015. And they never found the bodies. They never found parts of the plane, which apparently washed up and proved to be conclusive of that of a Boeing 777. But, where's God at in those kind of things? If there's divine providence, why do all those 200-something people have to die in that plane? There's no rational explanation for that. Oh, well, their death served a purpose in the lives of their loved ones and other people that were touched. The investigators, and it brought them closer to God. Or it's always some kind of crap like that. And again, I'm not saying that through adversity that people can't be drawn together, but that's always the explanation. Oh, God's ways are higher ways, and this sort of thing. And how about the countless other airline disasters, or other disasters where multitudes of people died for no good reason, and they didn't receive any miracle? I'm certainly no greater than they are. You're no greater than they are. So how come it is our lives are spared when we get on planes? And these were the kind of things I began to wonder about. They seem to not make any sense when you say there's a divine being, there's a God in heaven, and he's looking out for you. When you look up at the world around you and all the chaos, it doesn't add up. And then, of course, Christians will try to explain away that by saying, oh, well, it's because the ruler of this world, because the devil, because Satan's in charge, and he's the one controlling this world. And so for the time being, while God's, up in heaven until he returns and comes back, till Jesus comes back, Satan has dominion over the world. And it's just like, man. And on that note, I'll digress to the idea that this belief about Diablo and Lucifer and Satan, and it's written in the Bible, and this sort of thing, and this sort of being has existed throughout the centuries in human consciousness, human psyche. We've had this being exist, and when I look around at the world, I'm often given the thought that I feel like maybe the devils, maybe the monsters, maybe the evil people are really us. Maybe the evil is within us, and maybe we're the devil. That's like the concept, oh, well, now you're getting on that line and saying, like, maybe everybody's a god and we're all God. And I'm just saying, maybe the evilness comes from within us. And maybe we don't have to project it out on some other supernatural being with a pitchfork and devil horns. So that's a conversation for another time. But I appreciate you watching this video. It is very difficult to look at things in the light of that there is some kind of creator, some supernatural being up in heaven that has control, and because if they have control, that means they're in control of every good and every bad thing that happens. And if this bad stuff is happening, one has to call into question, why is this bad stuff happening? And of course the Christian explanation is things, well, everything happens for God's glory, for His will, for His purposes, and for His reasons, and so we don't really know what those are. And it's like, you don't know that. That's just your way of explaining away the fact that you can't explain this bad stuff that's happened. So that's some of the explanations, that's some of the reasons for why I really began to question it and say, you know what, I don't know that I'm dealing with an actual real being here, that there is some divine creator. You know, it definitely calls into question, though, if you're like saying there is nothing in the Bible that's true and there is no God and that all we have is this life that we have, then you have to begin to start looking at the whole thing about intelligent design and the human body and nature and the way everything is self-sustained and how, you know, how does it all work together. And of course, my knowledge of, you know, biology and things, I have a very elementary, you know, never completed a biology class, so I'm probably naive when it comes to understanding some of those things, but I just feel like that, you know, that scientific explanations for things, to me, outweigh any kind of supernatural, any kind of religious, any kind of spiritual explanations. I'm not, you know, I have a hard time with the spiritual part because it just doesn't seem to hold up. I mean, someone recently shared a story with me about angels coming to visit their loved one before they died to help them, bring them in. And now I don't know. I don't want to be rude and say, okay, that's probably a bunch of bull, but because I don't really know. But isn't there other explanations that could potentially explain away that it was angels? You know, that maybe it was a hallucination, or maybe, you know, maybe as they were losing consciousness, you know, they sort of went into a dreamlike state and they were sort of semi-conscious, semi-not. I mean, I don't know. They say, well, yeah, any excuse that would anything that would remove God or anything that people, you know, Christians would say that, you know, you wouldn't, what would it take for you to believe in any kind of miracles and anything sort of stuff? Well, you know, miracles could happen, but that doesn't mean that it's created by a God. That, you know, I mean, sometimes if, you know, you just don't get hit by a train that day, maybe it was just great luck that you just happened to get out in the nick of time. Doesn't mean that was a miracle and that you need to fall on your knees and pray and thank God for saving you. I mean, it's just I just feel like there's so many other explanations for the things that happen in the world. And I get that there are some things that do go unexplained. There are mysteries of life that through naturalism we have a hard time trying to explain those things. And that's sort of the way that scientific with evolution sort of falls short with explaining things, is that, you know, evolution can only go so far and it starts to fall short. Scientific theories can go so far, and then we can say, okay, well, what created the universe? Oh, the Big Bang. All right, well, what started the Big Bang? Well, and you just start getting into this sort of leap of faith when that Christians are asking you, the scientific community is now asking you to sort of embark on that same sort of leap of faith in believing in their theories or their hypotheses, which really haven't been proven yet. So, you know, it just seems like everybody's in the same camp, wanting you to just take what they say on faith without necessarily having any empirical data. Although I will say, on the side of science, there seems to be oftentimes a lot more empirical data for us to base our decisions on than a superstition or supernaturalism, or, you know, just sort of believing in, you know, the supernatural, just believing that there's a God, believing that there's, you know, some type of spiritual thing going on. I don't believe that we should not be spiritual people. I believe that spiritualism has a role in our life as human beings, but, you know, to what extent, I'm not sure. So I know covered quite a bit of ground and covered a number of different areas, and that's pretty much par for the course with my videos and you know, how things go. But for me to sit there and say that, you know, there's a God controlling making the plants and the animals and controlling when we die, when we don't know, when your number's up, when you're called by your creator, you're called by a creator, and it's like, oh, it was their time to go. It's like, those are just ways of explaining the unexplainable, explaining things that are the unknowns. They're not valid excuses to me. They're not. Not to some people they are, and that's okay. That's fine if they want to believe that. For me, I'm not. You say, well, then just don't believe it then. But I'd like to share the things that I have. I'd like to share the counter arguments to things with other people. I want other people to consider these things because I think this stuff is important. I think it's, if you're going to base your life off of a religion, if you're going to base your life off of, these concepts that are in the Bible, then don't you think that you ought to have your act together and maybe see if these things kind of pan out and if they kind of resonate with you or not? And if they don't, shouldn't you be at liberty to just not choose to do that instead of having some sort of, scare tactics that if you don't believe this stuff, then you're going to end up in the fiery pits of hell? I mean, that just, like I always say, that seems to me to be living a life of integrity more than, than to live a life of, well, I'm fear of the fire and brimstone that may await me in hell, so I better believe in this stuff and take it at face value and not dig any further because, if I question God or if I question the Bible, he's liable to strike me dead. And it's like, okay. You would hope that a loving and caring God, if he's compassionate and if he truly exists, would understand that an individual trying to navigate and they're not approaching it, they're using free will and they're not approaching it, questioning God and questioning the Bible from some standpoint of rebellion or, because they want to live a sinful life or they have some deep, dark secret they don't want to fall down and repent to Jesus for. That isn't the case. That's not what's going on. It's called living a life of integrity. It's being intellectually honest with oneself. And you don't have to do all these gymnastics and jump through all these hoops and try to explain away stuff that you shouldn't have to explain away in the first place. So, I think I'll wrap it up and leave that as today's video for you. Food for thought, something to think about. That, it seems rather mind-boggling that a God could be in charge of everything and only get the credit for the good things that happen, but whenever anything bad happens, that the credit goes to the devil, or it goes to us, and well, it's our own fault because we chose our own sinful ways, or it's like we're the bad people, we're not the ones that created he created us and we turned away from him, and it's like whatever. So, all right, I'll if I keep going, I'll just continue to digress. So I better wrap it up for today. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.